Hi, I'm Tara Wernsing, and this is an overview of what is science. So my purpose for creating this presentation is threefold. First, I wanted to present science as I see it, which is a very simple, everyday learning process. Sometimes we think it's some sophisticated, something separate from everyday humans and our everyday experience, and hopefully by the end of today's presentation you might see it a little different. The scientific method is simply a series of steps that humans have created to systematically learn through these steps, and each human is unique. So when they're learning in their everyday life, and even when they're following a series of steps, each person's unique. So science also includes comparing with others. So we like to find out, hey, did you see what I saw? Did you experience what I see? And that's the social comparison process that then becomes social science. So let's get started. First, with a definition of science. So here's an astronomer that describes science as equipped with his five senses. Man explores the universe around him and calls the adventure science. A dictionary defines science as humans studying the natural world. And what does that mean? What's the natural world? So what humans are studying is their physical environment, and that includes the earth as well as the universe around the earth that we live in. And in science, these are usually specific fields such as physics, chemistry, geology, and astronomy. Science also includes when humans are studying themselves and other life forms. So these include the scientific areas of biology, ecology, anthropology, sociology, and psychology, just to name a few. Usually the first set, including biology, tend to be called the hard sciences, and then the social sciences tend to be called the soft sciences. Often in a purgatory in a negative way. But let's now focus on the steps of science that I'll outline in a moment. But I want to emphasize and start right here, which is science, which is humans studying the natural world, begins with humans having an experience. So humans are experiencing something. And how do humans have experiences? How do humans experience the natural world? And this is what happens through our senses. So there's the five major senses, and then I've included here the just sensing as a verb to include all of our senses. Now, why do humans study the natural world? So there's an inherent desire that emerges in humans that want to learn. And what do we want to learn about? Okay, we're curious about the sensory experiences that we're having in our life on Earth, a life in our physical bodies. And we're also curious about ourselves, our own nature, and the potential of what it is to be human, what we can learn, what we can do, what we can create. We're very curious human beings. Now, what causes us humans to desire to study and learn about the natural world? So there's natural curiosity is what I'm describing on the prior slide. But now I'm also pointing to human motivations, and there's a whole science around human motivations that I love to read and study. But there's two major ones I think all of us can relate to. which is the human desire to live. We often call this survival. I must survive. And we don't want to die. We want to survive at all costs. And we want to prolong our life as long as possible. Many people do. In the natural physical world, like life on earth as we call it. And then for many people, there's a second major motivation, which is the desire to enjoy our life on earth. So we often describe this as I want to experience health and happiness and pleasure versus pain. The next question is, how do humans study the natural world or study nature? So this is what's called a scientific method. And I'm going to describe it in a couple ways, simple and then a little more detail. So first, the scientific method is created by humans to learn what works. So what are the laws of cause and effect, for example? And what are the universal laws of cause and effect that apply to every human, not just me or you, but both of us, all of us. So we call those universal principles or universal laws. And that's a major interest of human beings. And in addition, we like to learn how and why something works in the way that it works. So we often call this like the operating principles or the process mechanisms. So here's the first view of what the steps are of the scientific method. So here I'm saying science is a human learning process, something we do every day. And what is it we do every day? Okay, we wake up, we have sensory experiences in our body, in our life on earth. And second, we have an ability, capacity to observe that we're having these experiences and learn about ourselves. And this is the capacity that's often described as self-awareness. And humans have a unique version, a unique capacity of self-awareness that's beyond other life forms on Earth. Then third, in the learning process, humans seek. So we are curious. We seek to learn. We seek to ask questions. We're naturally curious. If you think about children and their first questions, why this? What's that? And then as we grow up, we may lose that natural, inherent curiosity about things for various reasons. And then the fourth step in the human learning process is humans like to experiment. And you see this with children too, where we're using our body to try things out. Trial and error. I'm going to get up and try to walk. I'm going to fall down. I'm going to get up and do it again. So we're testing things out, and then as we get older, we kind of track what we're learning over time. We may measure things over time. So this is the experimentation process, learning through doing, experiential learning. And then this provides the learning. When we're learning, we want to learn truths, as in what's really happening, what's the reliable causes and effects that make life predictable, what's the knowledge I want to learn that's stable over time, so the theories, the stable laws of physics and metaphysics and ethics. And then here's another way to see the scientific method. It's the same steps. I'm just describing them a little different with the emphasis on human. So the learning steps are human experiences, followed by human observations of those experiences, which in the research world is called qualitative research usually. And then human hypothesis develops. So we're curious about what we're observing, about what humans are experiencing in life on Earth. And so we start to build a hypothesis, a theory, a proposition. We start to anticipate what might be a universal truth, a universal law. And how do we test it out? That's where we experiment. And there's lots of ways to do those experiments and try to control certain factors and manipulate or change one factor so that we can see, oh, is this causing this effect over here? How do we set that up? So that's the experimenting, and then measuring the effects of our experiments and the effects on experiences, I think I want to say too. And the measurement process and trying to put everything into quantitative terms that we're talking about here is often called quantitative research. And then lastly, I also wanted to emphasize how social the whole learning process is and why it always ends up including social sciences. Because humans, even if they're going through this learning process individually, we naturally want to compare to others and find out if they're finding the same things. Are they seeing and sensing what I am? Are they running experiments, different ones, similar to mine, not? And what are they finding? So then here's one more view of the same process with a little more detail. So it's experience, human experience is where it all begins. So science is not separate. It actually begins with humans having sensory experiences. And then our self-awareness capacities can begin to activate and operate to observe what we are experiencing. So in my model, experience is primary, as they say in some intellectual circles. And then our self-awareness capacities are second. And then in the learning process, we begin to question. Our natural curiosity and motivations to learn will have us build hypotheses to figure out what's going on and what's causing what we're experiencing and observing. And to test our hypotheses, then we experiment. So we do trial and error. We try things out, see if it works. If not, and as I said, we can isolate one particular factor or something we think is causing something else and see if we measure that over time. Does it provide evidence that indeed it's true, that this causes this effect, and it does it consistently across time or across people? Will I find the same experimental results with the things I try out that you try out? So that takes us to the step 6 with the comparing. And then lastly, this slide adds this repetition, this repetitive process. So science as a social science and like academia itself is just repeating all of this again and again. Individuals like me as a researcher, which I've been, goes through this process, but then I'm constantly comparing with others. And then to get research published, you go through this big social learning process, comparing, evaluating, questioning each other's research, experiments, measurements, and findings. Then lastly, I just wanted to add a couple points, which is, let's start with this question. Why does the human study of the natural world become a social science? So it's like, why is science not just simply a learning process? Why does it get messy and become a social science, a social learning process? And I think this is a beautiful thing, but part of the controversy that we see in evaluating knowledge and facts, and science itself seems under attack lately. And we need to also remember each human being is unique. So that means each one of us, we know physically we're unique, like fingerprints and many parts of our bodies, and our bodies themselves are unique. We're also unique perceivers. We're unique experiencers, unique sensors, unique communicators and unique creators. So this means I'm having unique viewpoints and biases in what I'm seeing and experiencing and going to test and question and talk about with others. So that's the reason why science, in one sense, is so simple learning process, simple steps. But then to get at like what's universally a cause and effect going on, like in physics, how did we learn those principles? Then we talk to others, we compare with others, we compare over time. And that's the more complex aspects of science as we know it. So learning together helps humans discern what are the universal principles, laws, and truths. That's the benefit of science and social learning processes, even though it gets messy at times, in today's world especially. And that's the last point I want to say. My heart really goes out to all of us in our world right now, because to me it feels like there's just endless war, all kinds of war, physical wars, political wars, and then there's, you know, in the news headlines, wars against science, against truth, and against each other. So I'm going to talk about this more in the future. For now, I want to discern the difference between the tools that humans create and the humans' use of those tools. And I call this the tool versus motivation, or with science, I might call it the scientific method is just a learning process, but how it gets used is based on the motivation of the human heart. And when you think of these physical tools you see here, like a hammer is a tool. It can be used to help humans or to harm them or to kill them even. And how it gets used is driven where, right? I'm saying it's coming from something inside a person has them use a tool to harm another human. And I think that gets lost in a lot of the debates that are going on. So that's going to be one of my focuses moving forward. I hope you enjoyed this summary. See you soon.